Let me explain a little bit of what we're doing here. We're interviewing as many Vietnam veterans who want to be interviewed, and this is part of an ongoing series. The Historical Society spent 2 years interviewing World War II veterans, and I don't know how many they did, but quite a few. And what they do is they give a copy, you'll get a copy of this tape, and then a copy of the tape goes to the local library. And with the World War II veterans, they sent copies of the tapes to a World War II museum that's starting up somewhere in Mississippi or Louisiana or someplace. So at some point, I don't know, if we find some organization that would like to have these tapes, we'll probably send them on to that group also. Very relaxed, just more of a conversation. I'm not here to grill you, and you feel free to share what you want and not share what you don't want. So that's fine with me. So let's begin. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Larry Cooper. You don't know where I was born or what?
Family right now. Married? Children?
No, I'm divorced, but I have 3 children, all grown.
Okay.
They all live here in Crawfordsville. One lives in Russellville. But
How old are the children?
daughter's 28, I believe. She sells real estate here in town. Leslie Cooper.
Okay, yeah.
And my oldest son is 37. He is a supervisor over the electricians at Nucor. And my youngest son, Brett, works at Donnelly's, same place I did.
Okay. How long have you worked at Donnelly's?
I've been there 39 years, counting my service time.
Long time. So what do you do right now? What's your
I'm
job?
a liner backer operator. I work in the bindery.
Mhm.
We basically run on a case-bound line. I've worked in the same area my whole career there,
Okay.
in the bindery.
Okay. Where were you born?
Well, I was actually born in Vermilion County, Clinton Hospital, but my parents, we lived in Rockville. I was born and raised basically in Rockville.
So what high school did you go to? Rockville High School.
Rockville. It's no longer there.
What did your father do?
He was a carpenter, and he worked at Air Force Base there when it was an Air Force Base. It's now a facility for women, I think, kind of a prison like
Really?
now. Yeah, but it used to be an Air Force Base.
Down by Rockville.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
He worked there for about 10 years and carpentered too, and finally he decided he loved the carpenter work a lot more, so he quit the other job. And that's what he was doing until he died.
Okay.
He's no longer with us.
Okay. What was life like growing up in Rockville?
Well, it's pretty small town. It's what I'd say pretty laid back. You know, it's kind of a farming community, but not a whole lot there.
Covered bridges, right?
Well, yeah, that was before Covered Bridge Festival, so.
Oh, okay. That's a more recent...
Yeah, that's not all that, well, I don't know when that started, but covered bridges weren't anything to us.
Yeah.
We saw them every day.
Okay. Okay. Brothers and sisters? Or?
I have an older 4-year-old sister 4 years older
Right.
than myself, and my brother's 18 months younger
Okay.
than me. There's 3 of us.
Okay. In high school, play sports, activities?
Not really. We lived kind of on a mini farm, and we done chores all the time, and
Sure.
basically we were more outdoorsy, I guess.
Right.
We spent all of our weekends in the woods.
Right. Okay. Hunting, good
Yeah,
hunting
yeah,
down there?
Yeah, we
Fishing?
hunted a lot.
Yeah. So, did you enlist in the military or were you drafted?
Well, I was basically drafted, but I was going through a divorce at the time, so it was kind of unusual in a way. I mean, it was pretty rough at the time because I got my draft notice like in, I don't know, it was in April or
What year are we talking about?
68,
Okay.
and my father died just shortly after that, so I got a 90-day extension. I was supposed to go in May, which was, my birthday's in May, and the cutoff year was like 26, so I actually got drafted when I was 25, and I would have been 26 in May, but when he passed away, then I got a 90-day extension. I didn't go in until August, but I was 26 years old when I went in.
So what year did you graduate from high school?
60.
Okay. So what did you do in between high school graduation and the time you got drafted?
Well, I worked at a little seed corn factory there in Rockville for a while, and then they built a new little plant there, Dormeyer Industries it was called. I worked there for about 7 months, and then I got on at Donnelly's and started driving back and forth. I was still at home then, but I've worked at Donnelly's ever since.
Yeah. Did you have any family members who were in World War II or Korea?
I had not immediate family.
Right.
I had some uncles that was in Korea,
Okay.
but my dad never was in the service. He had high blood pressure, and that back in those days that kept you out.
Sure.
But other than that, I had I had 2 uncles, I think, in Korea.
Okay, so we're talking about 1968. You get your draft notice at 25, which is a lot older than most of the guys. What did you know about Vietnam at the time that you got your draft notice? Did you know much about it?
Not really. Only, what you hear, I guess, and then there was quite a bit of it on TV at that time.
Sure.
But I wasn't aware at the time that we had, we had people over there in like 64 or something like that.
Absolutely.
And I was not aware of that at all until after I went in.
Right. Was there anyone in Rockville who had been in Vietnam and came back?
Not that I remember.
Okay.
But I didn't stay in Rockville too long. The driving, I moved. I lived in Crawfordsville here when I got drafted.
Sure.
But I had to register through Rockville.
Right. So you get your draft notice. You went for your physical, probably over in Indianapolis earlier on.
Yeah.
Got your draft notice. Where did you end up first?
I went to took my basic in Fort Campbell.
Okay. Describe a little bit about basic training. What were your impressions of basic training?
Well, it wasn't easy. I know that it was hard. I think it was harder on me because I was a little bit older.
Yeah.
And I had 2 sons here,
Right.
And but I went in with the attitude that I was gonna make the best of it I could, and which I think was the right thing to do.
Sure.
I was, I saw a lot of people a lot of young guys that just really didn't. They despised it and this and that. It wasn't anything that I enjoyed, but because most of us knew where we were going,
So at 25, and a lot of these kids who are 17, 18, did you sort of become a father figure for some of these guys?
Not too much in basic,
Right.
but after we went through basic and AIT and got to Vietnam, we of course everybody has their own little cliques, I think, but my nickname in Nam was Gramps. I was old as my company commander.
Okay. That's it. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So, basic training, 10 weeks, was it 10? 8, 10?
I believe it was 8.
Yeah.
8, and then...
Okay. When you came out, what was your MOS? What were you assigned as an
11B 40, that was infantry.
Right. So, think about, I'm thinking about when I was in basic training, about 3 days before basic training ends, they come in with this list of what the MOSs are and where your next assignment was. What was your reaction when you got 11 Bravo MOS?
Well, I don't really remember,
Sure.
but you know, we had been in enough at the time, I guess, that either you were artillery or infantry usually. The only thing I really remember was that, you know, and probably more so when we were in AIT was, you know, well, artillery maybe didn't have to walk as much with a pack on, or you might get to go to Germany if you were lucky. But that, I mean, basically that's what a lot of us thought, I think.
Okay. Where did you do your AIT?
We went to Fort Lewis, Washington.
Fort Lewis, Washington. Really?
Yeah, in the wintertime.
So a lot of snow and cold,
Rain mostly, every day.
Okay. And your AIT was 12 weeks? 12 weeks AIT?
It was either 8 or 12,
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay. What was the difference between AIT and basic training? I mean, your perceptions of it.
Well, as I recall, I didn't really see a lot. It's supposed to be advanced training, but, you know, I think you learn more about, you know, combat situations and stuff like that. Basic was basically discipline and things like that. I think the advanced training was exactly what it says. It was, you learn more about weapons and this and that.
Did you have instructors in AIT who had been in Vietnam?
Yes, we had one that I recall was a ranger, but we had some sergeants and stuff that were platoon sergeants in basic that had come back from Nam.
Have they told you stories?
Well, there was a few, but not. You know, it was mostly yelling.
Right. The key criterion for a platoon sergeant.
Yeah.
After AIT ended, you had a short leave, come home, or do you
No,
remember?
we went straight from there to Oakland, I think, but I don't believe we did. We might have. I don't recall. But I knew we had a couple days or something between basic and AIT, but I don't recall where we did or not. I'm thinking we went straight to Oakland from there.
Okay, so straight to Oakland as a group?
Yeah,
and
basically.
Okay, and then you were at Oakland for a few days, and then flew out of Travis Air Force Base, which is
I think it was. We went around. We left there and went to Guam, I believe, around that way.
And did a stop over there.
Did a stop in Guam, and then went to Benoit Air Force Base.
You came in to Benoit.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember any of the feelings on the plane as you were coming into Vietnam?
Pretty quiet, really. Yeah. I think your thoughts were mostly of, you know, what you were getting into.
Sure. Now, did you know the other guys on the plane? Some were from your AIT group?
Yeah, there was a friend of mine that we went through basic and AIT together and went to Nam together, was assigned the same unit together. He was from over in Avon, Indiana. And we went through the whole thing together.
Really? That's unusual.
Yeah, it is. It really was.
Okay, so you arrive at Benoit. Getting off the plane, did they have the lineup of guys who were going to be getting on your plane to come home?
Yes, sir.
And what were they saying to you?
They never said a lot, but I remember how they looked. They were in jungle fatigues, and I remember it being hot. You know, when you get off, it was the middle of winter when we went over.
Sure.
And it was plenty warm.
Yeah.
But they weren't saying a lot. But
okay, so the month you arrived in Vietnam would have been January 1969.
Yeah.
I missed you by, I arrived about 3 months after that. So I was at Long Binh, which was about 10 miles Benoit
Yeah.
Air Base. So you arrive at Benoit, then where do you go?
Well, as I recall, we stayed around there for training or something for about a week.
In-country training?
Yeah, and
Okay.
then we were assigned to our companies then.
And where was your assignment?
Well, the first place I really remember was LZ Professional, which was, Chulai was our rear area.
Okay.
And then there was a little, like a company rear area was called LZ Bayonet. And from then on, from there, we went to the LZ out in the field.
Okay.
I remember the companies rotating, but it must have been the company I was assigned to must have been the company that was in the field at the time, because they airlifted us from rear area right to the field.
Where in Vietnam is Chu Lai located?
I think it's about 80 miles south of Da Nang
Okay.
in I Corps.
Okay, so how did you fly from Benoit to Chu Lai?
I believe it was in a C-140 or
Okay.
141. I know it was awful noisy in there.
Okay. So you arrived in Chu Lai, the rear area, and then you immediately went out to your base.
Yeah, I think it might have been the same day. If it wasn't, it was the next day. We were loaded on Hueys and
Taken out. What were you feeling when you arrived at the LZ?
well, I don't really remember exactly. I just, it was scary.
Sure.
You didn't have any idea really what was going to go on.
Right.
And, but I guess maybe, I had the same attitude as I had when I went in. I was going to try to make the best of it I could. And maybe why I'm sitting here today, I don't know.
Okay. What were your duties in your unit, in your platoon? I mean, you were a grunt.
Yeah.
And what kind of missions were you guys running?
Well, we just worked, you were assigned to, there was maybe the battalion was probably on the fire base, and which consisted of 4 companies, I think, and you had a couple companies in the field. We had areas of operation that maybe 1 or 2 companies stayed on the fire base, and the other 2 went out and walked around, and basically is all we done, walked around till we got shot at or something, but we rotated every month or so. We'd come back in on the fire base, rotate around.
Okay, so you were basically out in the field about 30 days each time.
At least,
Yeah.
I would say.
Okay. Describe the area, the landscape. What was it like?
Well, it was what I'd just call hilly. It wasn't really what I'd call mountains. Mostly elephant grass and rice paddies, and the elephant grass was 10 or 12 feet high. A lot of times you were walking through, you had no idea where you were going.
Sure.
But as far as you hear a lot about jungle, we really weren't in that kind of terrain.
Right.
We were in some, mountainous, what they call mountains. I don't know, that it wasn't anything you couldn't walk up. A lot of rocks and
Right.
a lot of bombed out places,
Right.
holes around where bombs had lit and artillery rounds. But a lot of rice paddies too.
Sure. Sure. A lot of small villages in the area?
A few.
Mhm.
Few sugar cane fields, but
Mhm.
a lot of, only once or twice I remember even being in anything I would call a town, which is, most of it was bombed out anyway,
Sure.
but there were still people around.
Right. Climate, hot, humid,
Very much, most of the time.
a lot of mosquitoes.
Yeah, mosquitoes and leeches, land leeches they were as bad as the mosquitoes, I think.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for mosquito repellent. It'd kill them all.
So a typical day for you?
Well, we'd get up, you know, and get ready and get a pack of rucksacks up and walk around. And we had objectives we were supposed to go to, I guess, and walk around. If you know, some days maybe nothing happened. Sweat through your clothes you know, we'd walk a while or 2 or 3 clicks maybe, and then sit down and rest. But you sweat through your clothes. I remember that very well, 2 or 3 times a day. No clean clothes,
right.
no nothing. Sometimes your boots and clothes would rot off of you before you got new ones.
Hot meals occasionally, or
Once in a while they'd fly out
Yeah.
hot meals to us and water.
Mm-hmm. Any beer?
Ammunition, no. Ammunition if you needed it.
Right.
But no, we never had any beer in the field that I remember.
Describe your company commander.
Well, I had a lot of them.
Okay.
I really did. There was a couple that, most of them, I think, were, you know, most of them were captains,
Sure.
but most of them were about my age, really. I was RTO for one of my company commanders. We got along great most of the time.
RTO, typically a pretty dangerous job, right?
Well, I never thought it was any worse than walking point or something.
But you've got that big antenna sticking up there.
But it was another 25 pounds on your rucksack too, which already weighed probably 100.
Yeah. So you, as an RTO, your responsibilities were what?
Well, you carried the radio for the company commander basically, and when you you stopped for the night, the perimeter, the company commander was always in the middle, and always thought that was a little something in my favor,
Sure.
I guess.
Right.
You got to be in a foxhole in the middle of the perimeter.
Right. Right.
But basically, you carried the radio for him and probably helped dig his foxhole at night.
Did you ever have to call in things?
Yeah, a time or two, but usually he took care of because he knew where you were. They kept their own maps and everything, and basically they knew what the grids and stuff. But I couldn't read a map,
Sure.
so that was basically your job was carry the radio for him.
What were the characters? Thinking back over the various company commanders you had, what made a good company commander in Vietnam?
Well, part of it was something I was just talking about. They knew where they were all the time. They knew how to read a map. There wasn't a lot of order given like you saw on the States, you know. They were just, I always thought they were pretty much just like one of the guys, because the platoon sergeants give most of the, you know, the platoon what they wanted to do, where they wanted to be at night or whatever. But company commanders were, you know, they'd been in the military for a few years. Some of them may not have been their first tour over there, so they knew pretty much what was going on. But I think most people, or I know I always respected mine, you know. But like I said, we were pretty much the same age, so we used to have kind of a joke about that sometimes, you know, respecting your elders. I said, well, I'm older than you are. So it was just kind of a joke we had between some of us. But
Did the company commander rely on you to sort of give him a sense of what was going on with the enlisted men in the...
Well, I don't really, not really, because they mostly, they kind of went, I guess, by chain of command. They would basically talk to the platoon sergeants and things like that, and, you know, get their information. But, you know, I was out there for a long time. I wasn't an RTO for all the time.
Sure.
I was in the company for quite a while before the job opened up, so I volunteered for it, I guess. Wasn't all that much more
Sure.
prestigious, I guess, but
Right.
it just,
Did you ever have to walk point during your?
yeah, I did, but it wasn't something I really enjoyed doing.
Was that a volunteer or was that rotated?
Yeah, it was basically
Really?
volunteer in our company. We had some guys that didn't mind. I probably walked second or third, which was just as bad, but like I said before, you know, I don't know whether there was some things that you just didn't volunteer for, you know, but
Like,
I had-
for example, what's something you didn't volunteer for?
well, I can give you an example. We were ambushed one time, and you know, I can't remember the kid's name. He got hit. Well, they got him back, but they left his rifle lay up there. Well, that was a no-no. So, you know, I don't know who it was, platoon sergeant or someone said, you know, asked for a volunteer to go get it.
Sure.
Well, I remember this kid from New York. He was gonna run right up there and get it. Well, that was all, you know, he got up there and got it, but he was lucky. He took a round right through his helmet, and it went around and around in his helmet, but it never hurt him. But I guarantee you, it scared the life out of him. He was a little reluctant when it come to volunteering again for one of those kind of missions, but you know, those kind of things happened. And
Were there any tunnel complexes in your
yeah,
area?
a lot of.
So how did you guys deal with tunnels? Did you send someone down to search or blow them or what?
We blew most of them. We didn't put very many people in that situation. We did have a tunnel rat or two, but mostly it was a 20-pound crater in charge most of the time.
You read some details where it was SOP that you had to search every tunnel before you blew it, but your commander said, let's just blow them.
Yeah.
Because that was pretty risky.
Yeah, we knew there wasn't anybody in there, anything in, you know,
Sure.
any of our people in there or anything that, usually they were so complex though that, you know, even after we blew them, we never went in them.
Yeah.
Once in a great while, someone might run out somewhere else, but
Right.
it was rare.
Right. Was there a lot of enemy activity in your AO?
Quite a bit.
Yeah. North Vietnamese regulars, Viet Cong, combination? Both. Yeah.
Mostly NVA, I'd say.
Yeah.
They were the toughest too.
You could tell the difference.
Yeah. Well, they dressed different for
Right.
one thing, if you saw them,
Right.
which you didn't.
Right.
Usually you didn't see.
Right.
But you know, you could see bushes running across rice paddy dikes or whatever. You knew that was pretty much VC. But the regulars, they were the tough guys. We had some allies that, you know, I don't know where you ever heard of those Rock Marines from Korea. Now those guys were tough too. They didn't take captives. Now that's just the way they operated. They were rough.
So you had some Koreans assigned to
We never actually worked with them,
Yeah.
but they worked in.
Yeah.
We were in some AOs that
Sure.
they were in. And
Did you ever run across Australians over there?
only heard them on
Yeah.
the radio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned earlier you were older than most of the guys, sort of became perhaps a father figure once over in Vietnam for some of these people.
Yeah, I had a lot of friends. Most of the friends I had were like 18, you know, but we had our own little clique. There was 6 or 8 of us that hung out together.
Sure.
And we had, you know, what good times we had together.
Right.
But I don't know. I think I may be the only one that came back out of all of us, really.
Really?
Yeah, that I at least came back without. There's a couple I know that came back that were wounded, but I'm probably the only one that came back without ever getting a scratch.
Is there one particular incident that you remember from, battle activity that really stands out in your mind?
Well, guess probably the first day we went in, we were unloaded on a hot LZ, and you know, bullets were flying around us, and we got some guys hurt and some guys killed, and
This is your first day
our very
out?
first day in the field. And I told you a while ago about the kid from Indianapolis
Right.
that was with me. We were all together. Anyway, we got out of that situation into some cover there. And of course we had some guys hurt. Well, they called in a medevac. They asked for volunteers to help load them on the choppers. Well, the choppers sat down out there in the middle of a rice paddy, and I mean, you was setting duck out there. Well, anyway, the kid from Indianapolis, he volunteered to help load one of them on the chopper. They got out, I don't know I can't even remember where they got them. I think they did get the wounded on the chopper, but he took a round through his leg, and of course they got him back with us, and I went over to see him, and of course he was in a lot of pain. And you know, hell, we don't know. I mean, I thought, man, if there's a year of this ahead of us, none of us will ever
Right.
make it out here.
Right.
But he was laying there on the ground, you know, and I went over to him and I said, well, Mark, I said, you're going home, you know. And he left, and I've never seen him since. And I've tried to look him up. He lives over Plainfield somewhere, but I've tried to find him, but I've never. But anyway, and then the guys that they didn't get on the choppers, you know, we carried them with us for about 3 days wrapped up in a poncho. That was my first week in country.
So you're thinking, this is worse than anything I could have imagined?
It's worse than anything I ever imagined. But you grow up pretty quick.
Right.
You know, and the guys, as I recall, the guys that had been there in country a few months, they helped you a lot. Because I know after I had been there 7 or 8 months and we got new guys in, you knew what they were feeling, and you were just like a seasoned veteran by that time.
So you talked to them about what they were going through?
You tried to help them, you know. It made a big difference if you explained. You know, you didn't learn any of that. You could have taken 2 months of classroom training in Vietnam or United States, anywhere.
Right.
But it wasn't anything like that. I mean, that's, you know, when you actually got there and saw what was going on, and you know, it hardens you. It really does. After a while, I've always said that, you know, you're so miserable most of the time when you were in the field, and you get so hard that you just didn't care. You had very, very few. Well, you cared about staying alive, and that was about it.
Right.
And
Staying alive and protecting your
yeah,
friends.
Yeah.
Did you take an R&R when you were over there?
Yes, I went to Hawaii, and of course my mother was by herself at that time, and I met her there, and we had a good time together.
Was it hard going back?
Hell, yes. Yeah, but I had about 7 months in at that time, and when I went back, it was hard, but I knew I had to do it, and I also knew I had talked to the battalion commander, and I had a good idea that I might be getting out of the field, you know, so they needed someone in what they called the S3 Air section, where you sat at a radio on the fire base and run all the resupply. And so I was lucky enough to get that job for about, well, I guess it was about 4 months. I'd done that the last 3 or 4 months.
So once you went back, you went.
Well, I got that job, and then one other time they needed, I think I might have been promoted to a sergeant by that time. So they needed somebody, and needed a platoon sergeant in the field, so I went back to the field for a week or two, and that was not easy to do, they didn't have anybody else to send, so I went out. Battalion commander came to me and asked me if, and after it was over, I was awarded Bronze Star for it. So, you know, I didn't want to go, honestly. I didn't. Once I got out of the field, I did look forward to going back. That was for sure.
Right.
But I did, and everything worked out. So,
what was the worst experience?
well, I guess probably we were in an AO one time, an area of operation, and we walked. I think I was about second or third in line, and the kid from California, it was pretty much our own little clique. There's 3 or 4 of us right up front there, and we walked right into an area there where, I mean, we knew there was Vietnamese around. You could smell them, really. I mean, you could. But anyway, Ralph Israel was the kid's name. He took a round in the head, and the kid, my friend from Wisconsin, Minnesota, St. Cloud, Minnesota, he was one step in front of me. He took 2 or 3 rounds and they went through his magazines. We used to wear magazines around our stomach, and it kind of turned him sideways, and he took one across his chest. He took about 4 rounds, but you know, I was lucky. I mean, the fire came from behind a big rock.
In the middle of the day?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So we called in airstrikes and whatever, but before that, I took a grenade and threw it over the rock. But you know, Ralph, he died instantly, and I had to help carry him out. And honest with you, you know, I was very, very emotional at the time. You know, Ralph, there was no helping him, but my other friend, we got him out, and he got wherever he went, Korea, wherever, Japan.
Mm-hmm.
But he went home. He lived. He went home, and I went and saw him like 10 years after I got out.
Really?
He just he'd gotten married, and it didn't work, and it was one of those deals where it ruined his life.
Sure.
It certainly did. He just couldn't handle anything after that.
Right.
But I haven't seen him for probably 20 years, 25 years.
What was the best experience of it?
Well, I guess probably the best, my brother was in the Seabees. He was in Cameron Bay at the same time I was. And the company commander, or the battalion commander, well, I believe it was a major. Anyway, him and I were pretty good friends. We had communicated a lot on the radio and so forth, but he called out and wanted to know if anybody in the company would like to have a 3-day pass. Well, nobody wanted to go anywhere. I told the company commander, I said, well, you know, my brother's in Cameron Bay. I'd like to go see him. He said, well, go. So I went back to the rear, and they cut me some orders, and I got to go to Cameron Bay and spend 3 days with him. But it wasn't nothing like I came from. They had warm showers, a barracks. Their rifles were locked up. But he had taken over my dad's business and he was a carpenter, and he came out of basic. Well, he went in basic as same as an E5, and he was building little schools and houses and stuff for the Vietnamese. But I was glad, because I wouldn't want him in the kind of situations I was in, and I was glad to go see him.
When you left country, you left from where?
I believe it was Benoit.
Benoit again?
I believe it was.
Okay. What was it like on the plane when you left?
A lot of shouting when it lifted off, I know that. Yeah.
And you probably didn't know many people on the plane.
Oh, nobody. But everybody was very, very happy to. As soon as that thing lifted off the runway, everybody was screaming and yelling, but it was. We went around the northern way coming back, and it was dark the whole time I was on that airplane. 18 hours, I think, flight, and never saw anything, but I didn't care. I knew I was coming home.
So you out-processed again at Oakland?
Fort Lewis, I believe.
Oh, you went to Fort Lewis,
I
okay.
believe that's-
And you were getting out of the military too at this?
Well, no, I still had 6 months to go.
Ah, so where did you get assigned?
Fort Hood.
What were you doing at Fort Hood?
Well, I remember when I reported after a 30-day leave, why we were in a line, they said, well, what do you want to be in, infantry or artillery? I thought, well, I've had enough of this infantry. I want to be in artillery, I think. So I was in 155 self-propels down there. I learned a little bit, about artillery that I didn't know.
But you knew you were getting out of the military.
Yeah.
Did you have any thought about staying in?
No, I could have, well, when I was in Nam, I could extend it 30 days and got out, but I had to extend through TEP. And I just didn't,
You didn't want to do that?
No, I didn't want to take that chance. I'd had enough of it. I thought I can surely do 6 months stateside over 30 days here.
Right.
And then when I got out, I had had enough of it. I had a job to come back to and family, so there was no question. I didn't have no desire to stay in the military.
Once you got back, you came back to Crawfordsville, you're back at R.R. Donnelly working. How did fellow employees treat you? I mean, did they know you had been in Vietnam?
Yeah, most of them do. They, or did. Really, we didn't talk about it much, most of them, were young too, but, some of the people that would have been, now, I've had a couple people that, and one of them is still a very good friend, and he never was in the military, but he always liked, I was one that it really didn't bother me to talk about, but, there was things that if I was talking about it, I didn't want to mention them, I didn't mention them,
Right.
But some people, they just didn't want to talk about it at all.
Did you hook up at all with any other Vietnam veterans here in Crawfordsville then?
No.
No.
It was a few years later that, and I can't even tell you who it was. It had to be probably Merle Martin or Gary Bell or some of them that I knew who they were, and they invited me to join the West Central Indiana Vietnam veterans, and I thought it would be a good thing and I've been a member ever since.
You read a lot of stories, you see movies about the psychological trauma that so many Vietnam veterans went through coming back. Did you really experience much of that? I mean, did you have flashbacks, nightmares?
Not very. I bet I could count on one hand the dreams I've had about, but it just did not affect me that way, I guess. I know I had a lot of, my mother is a very religious woman, and I know she prayed for me every day.
Right.
We all prayed. I don't care who you were. You said a prayer or two when you was in Vietnam.
There are no atheists in foxholes.
I don't think so.
Which was an interesting question. I mean, there were chaplains over there, and they tried to have regular religious services. Did you go to those?
Most of them. They would come out to the field maybe and set up a little table. I've even went to a Catholic, which it was just a short little service, and a lot of people went,
In 1975, when Saigon fell, reaction to that?
Well, I was glad to see it over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, truthfully, after I got out and came home, I knew it was, still going on. It went on for 5 years afterwards. But I didn't watch a lot of it on TV and didn't really keep up on it. I knew we were still there and so forth, but as I recall, I think I had just had enough.
Were you upset with the protests that were taking place?
Not really. Not really. It only, I think probably, if anything upset me, it was probably, it wasn't that the guys, didn't want to go, the people that went to Canada,
Right.
If that's what they wanted to do and believe, that was fine. But I really had reservations about letting them come back, But that's the kind of society we live in.
Sure. No consequences for your actions.
Well, seems like some of us do, and well,
Yeah.
but they're still American citizens. But
Yeah.
you can look at our society today. Look at the people that are here, and that's one thing about they're talking about closing borders and this and that. But my belief is if they want to let people come in this country, let them serve
Right.
serve in the military.
Right.
That's a strong belief of mine.
So would you advocate that anyone after they got out of high school did a couple of years of national service, whether it was the military or working in hospitals or doing something like that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I myself, I probably wouldn't have went in if I hadn't been drafted.
Right.
But it's a growing up process for a lot of kids. Kids today, I just don't think had the discipline we had.
Right.
And when I was a teenager,
Right.
not that there wasn't anything wrong with it. I'm a firm believer of it, but it does you some good.
Right.
It's an experience, that you wouldn't take $1 million for, but $1 million you wouldn't do it again. So.
Okay, a question. Knowing what you know now, what you went through, would you go to Vietnam again?
Well, if I was 18, 20 years
Right.
old, and I was in that situation, I would go.
Yeah.
Because, it's the right thing to do.
Okay.
But, if I was telling somebody, that...
What about your sons? What if your sons, you were the father and your sons were drafted and probably going to go to Vietnam? What would you tell your sons?
Well, I probably would tell them the same, tell them the way I felt when I went, It's, nobody, I didn't really want to go.
Right.
My mother didn't want me to go. And,
Right.
your family, they know where you're going, but, make the best of it. I've always, I think, if you're drafted and that's part of your military obligation, if you're 18 years old and you're drafted, you serve your country, it's the right thing to do.
Sure.
That's probably what I tell them, to go and make the best of it.
Right. So you take pride in the fact that you served your country
Yes,
in
I do.
Vietnam.
And I feel like that, I would be just as proud of them as if they were in.
Right. Did your children ever ask you to talk about your experiences?
Not a whole lot, no. My daughter, I had a lot of slides that I took, and the only thing, she had a little project in school one time. She took all those and put them on a movie, and other than that, well, we've watched that a time or two. I don't know if my sons or my grandkids have probably ever seen it, but maybe they'll watch this.
Yeah. Have you been to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial?
Several times.
What was your feeling when you saw it for the first time?
Well, it was an emotional experience, you get teary-eyed when you go there the first time. I looked up some of my friends that names were on there, and it has a lot of special meaning, I think, for a Vietnam veteran.
Right.
Not that the rest of them don't, but
Right.
and our group even went over for the dedication of the Women's Memorial. Some of us from here in town. Right. It's a good time, but to get you all get to go together and
Right.
spend some time together, and you know, you talk about your tour in Vietnam, but it's an emotional experience, and it's a wonderful thing. I think I think we printed a book out at work a few years ago about, and, you know, I'd sit and read a lot about how it came about,
Right.
everything. But it's and we were very proud to have the moving wall out
Right.
all that day, and we all participated in that. And I think the community enjoyed that also.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I had a lot of people come up to me at work and place and say they want to know if we was going to have it back.
Yeah. The candlelight service that evening was
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
unbelievable.
I enjoyed that. Speaking of that, I had a real good friend that was a helicopter pilot in Nam. Of course, I got to know him really well because I was running resupply. And
Right.
he was one of those guys that he didn't care where a guy was, how much fire they were taking, he would go get them. That man saved more lives in Vietnam than most medevacs, I'd say.
Sure. Sure.
And I never heard, he was still there when I left, and I'd never heard of him. And so when we had the book and the wall out here, I thought, I don't know why, but I thought, well, I'm going to see if his name's in there. And it was. It was, and that was kind of an emotional thing for me because he was a good friend. I never communicated with him afterwards, but that guy saved a lot of lives in Vietnam.
Have you seen any of the Vietnam movies that came out? Platoon?
I saw it. There's a lot in there that I disagree with.
Right.
You know,
Right.
there's a lot that is true, but what I tell people, if that happened, I didn't see any of it. You know, it may be true, but I did not see any of it.
Did you have much interaction with the South Vietnamese civilians at all?
Some. We worked with South Vietnamese, what they call the ARVNs, you know,
Right.
the South Vietnamese Army. They were with us quite a bit.
What was your estimation about their fighting capabilities?
It was just mediocre, I'd say, compared to ours.
Yeah.
Because they travel in numbers, that's for sure. If we had a company, they had a battalion, and well, I guess probably a lot of Americans probably felt, well, you know, these guys could be doing more. This is their country, but you know, but we were giving them everything they had, you know,
Sure.
uniforms,
Right.
everything they had, the United States was providing for them.
Right.
I always felt they could do more, but
We've been talking almost 50 minutes here, so I want to wrap it up. Is there any final thing you want to say, anything that I didn't ask you that you want to talk about, or any final comment?
well, I don't think so. I think we pretty much covered it
Okay.
all, but I'll always remember that, you know, the letters and things that I got from home it always was a boost or kept your morale up, you know, and when things got tough, there wasn't nothing any better than a letter from your mom or your whoever, you
Sure.
know. And I've always felt that, you know, it had a lot to do with, you know, people's frame of mind and how they handle things.
What's your feeling about the current military operations in Afghanistan?
Well, we all know, you know, so far it hasn't been too bad, but, you know, we had that incident yesterday. Whenever they start putting thousands of ground troops in there, we're going to start losing people. I mean, you know, I just hope that they don't drag it out for 8 or 10 years like they did in Vietnam, but I think we got the capabilities of ending that thing when we want to. It's just a matter of...
So do you look back on Vietnam and get upset thinking, we had the capabilities of ending that thing when we wanted to and just didn't?
Oh, I think in some cases, yeah, I think there was a lot of politics involved there. I just, we dropped who knows how many millions of tons of ordnance over there in wide open spaces. They could have flown on north a little ways up around Hanoi somewhere and stopped an awful lot of that.
Right.
That was, that's my feeling.
Last question. If given a chance, would you want to go back to Vietnam now, just to see the country again, back in the area where you were?
Yeah, I think it would kind of be, I'm sure it's changed so much in 30 years you wouldn't recognize it, but I think there's a couple things that you'd never forget, and that's the smell of the place and things like that. But if it just to be going, I don't really think I would.
Okay.
It's something I would want to do, but.
Okay. That's it, Larry. You're done. You're out of it. In fact, I'm going to pause this thing.